If you trace the stories of people who have achieved true financial mastery, not luck, not windfalls, not temporary success, but deep, durable, lifelong control over their money, you will almost always find a moment when a single piece of wisdom from a book shifted the trajectory of their life. Not because the book promised secrets or shortcuts, but because it offered clarity in a world where money often feels overwhelmingly complicated. The greatest personal finance authors, Dave Ramsey, Ramit Sethi, Morgan Housel, Suze Orman, J.L. Collins, Robert Kiyosaki, and others, do not write to impress you with their intelligence. They write to introduce you to a version of yourself you might not yet believe you can become. Someone financially grounded, intentional, calm, and in control. Mastering your money is less about mastering numbers and more about mastering the psychology behind those numbers. And that is where these authors begin by revealing that money is never just money. It is fear. It is desire. It is identity. It is childhood memories echoing through adult decisions. It is society's expectations sitting heavy on your shoulders. It is emotion disguised as math. And once you understand that, you begin to see why so many people feel overwhelmed even when they know what they should do financially. The challenge isn't the information, it's the transformation. Dave Ramsey enters this conversation with a voice like a stern but deeply caring coach. His books strip money down to something almost moral, a matter of character as much as math. For him, mastering your money begins with discipline, the kind that feels rigid at first but liberating later. He teaches you to attack debt not because debt is inherently evil, but because debt steals your peace, your options, your future. And as you read his words, you begin to feel a shift. You start to imagine what life might feel like without the heaviness of owing anyone anything. Ramsey's message is blunt, yes, but beneath that bluntness is a profound compassion. He wants you free. Free from fear, free from chaos, free from the noise that debt brings into your home and your mind. Then the bookshelf introduces you to a very different voice, Ramit Sethi, whose writing doesn't sound like advice as much as it sounds like a conversation with a friend who refuses to let you settle for a mediocre financial life. Ramit doesn't want you to spend less. He wants you to spend consciously. He doesn't want you to cut lattes. He wants you to cut mindlessness. He teaches you that mastering your money is not about restriction, but about alignment. What is your rich life? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Who are you becoming inside it? When you answer these questions honestly, your money begins to organize itself around your values. You stop chasing generic financial rules and start pursuing a life that belongs uniquely to you. And for many people, this is the first time money feels like possibility rather than pressure. Suze Orman brings yet another dimension to the conversation, the emotional protection that money provides. She speaks to the part of you that worries quietly at night, the part that craves safety, the part that knows that financial fragility can turn the smallest crisis into a storm. Her writing calls you to build cushions, emergency funds, insurance, boundaries, not because she wants you to be fearful, but because she wants you to be empowered. She reminds you that money is not just a tool for opportunity, it is a shield. And the moment that shield becomes strong, you begin to breathe differently. You begin to make decisions from a place of strength instead of scarcity. Morgan Housel, meanwhile, stands at the intersection of money and human nature. His words drift less like advice and more like quiet revelations. He teaches you that mastering your money requires mastering the impulse to compare, the impulse to panic, the impulse to chase. He whispers truths that follow you long after you close the book, that wealth is what you don't see, that risk and luck shape more of life than we want to admit, that freedom is the highest dividend money pays. Housel does not give you tactics, he gives you perspective. And perspective is often the most powerful tool of all because it recalibrates your emotional reactions, and emotional reactions are what derail most financial plans. And then, of course, there is J.L. Collins, whose simplicity cuts through financial confusion like sunlight through fog. His famous FU money philosophy doesn't stem from rebellion, but from freedom, the freedom to choose work, not endure it. He teaches you that the path to wealth is embarrassingly simple. Spend less than you earn, invest the surplus, avoid debt, stay the course. He removes the drama, the noise, the franticness that surrounds investing and replaces it with something almost meditative. Collins wants you to stop performing intelligence and start practicing patience, because in the long run, patience outperforms brilliance. Robert Kiyosaki adds yet another layer, a challenge to question everything you've been taught about work, income, and financial security. His writing is provocative on purpose. He wants you uncomfortable. He wants you to question why schools teach you to earn but not to grow, why society encourages consumption rather than assets, why people cling to job security long after it stops serving them. Kiyosaki's ideas aren't about real estate alone, they're about awakening your entrepreneurial instincts, your ability to build something that pays you even when you are not working. And this awakening often becomes a pivot point for people who realize that mastering their money means stepping out of passive financial habits and into active wealth creation. But what ties all these authors together is not a single strategy. It is a single theme. Money mastery begins internally before it manifests externally. The books on your money mastery shelf do not just teach you what to do. They teach you who to become. They teach you to cultivate habits that quietly accumulate into a different future. They teach you to confront the silent frictions in your financial life, the ones caused by ego, fear, urgency, comparison. They teach you that financial peace is less about having more and more about needing less. They teach you that stability is built in invisible moments where you choose discipline over impulse, clarity over chaos, planning over drifting. And as you walk deeper into these teachings, you begin to realize that mastering your money is not a moment, but a metamorphosis. It is waking up one day and noticing that you think differently. You pause before purchasing, you calculate before committing, you plan before reacting. Your savings grow not because you tried harder, but because your identity shifted. Your investments grow because volatility no longer terrifies you. Your confidence grows because you know that every step you take now is aligned with the future you have consciously chosen, a future shaped steadily, quietly, powerfully by authors who handed you not just tactics, but transformations. Transformations that take hold in the deepest parts of your financial life and guide you forward toward a future where money becomes not a source of stress, but a source of strength. A quiet strength that begins to permeate every corner of your life, softening some edges and sharpening others. Because once money stops being the haunting presence in the background, anxiety humming like a low electrical current, you finally create the emotional space to live with intention. And this is where the teachings from the great financial authors begin to move from theory into embodiment. You no longer simply know what they say, you begin to feel it shaping the way you move through the world. Mastering your money, they remind you, is ultimately about creating a life where decisions rise from clarity rather than fear. You start waking up in the morning with a different posture, a different internal rhythm. Bills no longer feel like threats, they feel like part of a system you've learned to control. Purchases no longer feel like reflexes, they feel like choices you weigh against the future you're building. Even small moments begin to change. The pause before swiping your card, the curiosity before agreeing to a commitment, the satisfaction of seeing your investments grow slowly rather than your expenses grow quickly. These micro shifts accumulate into a new financial identity. And as this identity strengthens, something else happens. Your relationship with work begins to evolve. You're no longer chained to the idea that your job defines your worth. You start asking deeper questions. What kind of work energizes me? What kind of work aligns with my values? What kind of work feels sustainable for the life I want? The financial authors who guided your early steps, Ramsey, Sethi, Collins, Housel, begin to echo in your mind, reminding you that financial security is not just about survival. It's about positioning yourself to choose work from empowerment rather than dependency. Money mastery creates space for purpose. You start to notice, too, how your emotional reactions to money soften. Where panic once lived, patience begins to settle. Where shame once lingered, shame about past mistakes, shame about debt, shame about not knowing what you should have known earlier, now lives a quiet forgiveness. These books teach you that financial transformation rarely comes from perfection. It comes from persistence. You learn that mistakes were not evidence of failure, they were tuition. And when you finally internalize that truth, something profound loosens. The fear of not being enough. From this calmer ground, You begin to build habits that become the scaffolding of a new life. You automate what once required willpower. You simplify what once felt overwhelming. You invest without drama. You spend without guilt. You save without resentment. And somewhere in this transformation, you realize that you no longer see money as the hero or the villain of your life. It has become neutral, simply a tool. And tools only become dangerous when used unconsciously. That's why so many financial authors return repeatedly to one theme: awareness. Becoming aware of your spending patterns, aware of your emotional triggers, aware of the cultural narratives that pull you toward consumerism, aware of the beliefs you inherited. Without questioning, awareness becomes the doorway through which mastery enters. And once you step through that doorway, you begin to see possibilities you couldn't see before, possibilities that were always there, simply hidden behind habits that no longer serve you. And then, almost quietly, you begin to understand what real financial freedom feels like. It's not the thrill of a sudden windfall or the pride of a high salary. It's the sensation of being able to breathe deeply. It's knowing that one unexpected expense will not shatter you. It's feeling grounded enough to make decisions that serve your long-term self rather than your temporary impulses. It's the way your mind settles into stillness when you check your accounts, not because they're perfect, but because they finally make sense. The authors who guided you toward this place often talk about the deeper layers of wealth, the kind that do not show up on a spreadsheet. The wealth of time, the wealth of choice, the wealth of peace, the wealth of stability, the wealth of not needing the approval of others, the wealth of becoming someone who trusts themselves. These are not the kinds of riches you can measure numerically, yet they are the riches that change your life most dramatically. And once you feel this shift, you begin to imagine broader horizons. You start thinking not just about survival and stability, but about generosity, legacy, and impact. You wonder what kind of world you can help create when your own foundation is solid. You wonder what passions you might explore if financial anxiety isn't constantly siphoning your attention. You wonder how many doors could open doors to creativity, relationships, health, service when money is no longer a cage, but a key. This is the moment when mastery begins to transcend personal benefit and becomes something you carry into your relationships, your community, your work. You teach your children not by lecturing them, but by embodying steadiness. You support friends not by rescuing them, but by sharing the mindset that helped you rise. You navigate conflicts about money with compassion rather than defensiveness. And you begin to look at the larger systems around you, economic, social, cultural, with clearer eyes, recognizing both the structures that harm and the structures that can be rebuilt. But perhaps the most surprising gift of mastering your money is this: it reconnects you to yourself. Because financial stress is deeply spiritual, it disconnects you from your intuition, from your creativity, from your inner calm. When that stress fades, even slowly, you begin to recognize parts of yourself you have forgotten. You remember what you care about. You remember what excites you. You remember that life is not meant to feel like a scramble. And suddenly, the practical lessons from these authors become something more profound. They become an invitation to live fully. And so, when you close the books that taught you these lessons, whether it was Collins with his simplicity, Housel with his wisdom, Sethi with his intentionality, Ramsey with his discipline, Orman with her safeguard mentality, you realize that mastering your money was never the final destination. It was the foundation for the life you want to build. A foundation strong enough to support your dreams, flexible enough to adapt as you grow, and peaceful enough to carry you through every uncertainty the future will inevitably bring. In the end, you understand that earning money is a skill, managing money is a discipline, but mastering money is a transformation. It is the moment when your financial life stops being a source of fear and becomes a platform for freedom, meaning, and self-direction. And as you step forward wiser, calmer, more intentional, you begin to feel the unfolding of a future shaped not by luck or circumstance, but by the steady, patient, soulful practice of becoming the kind of person who can steward abundance with humility and confidence. Creating a life where your money supports your purpose rather than